The Unlikely Friendship in the Pet Hotel, a funny and heartwarming holiday sleep story. Penelope had lived 12 years on this earth without ever once doubting her own dignity, and she was not about to start now. Yet here she was, being carried in a basket toward the entrance of what her human had cheerfully called a lovely pet hotel, as if such an establishment could ever be considered lovely by anyone with proper standards. The basket swayed slightly with each step, and Penelope pressed herself against the soft cushion inside. Her long silver-gray fur, fluffing out in what she hoped conveyed maximum displeasure. The indignity had begun that morning when her human had produced this basket from the hall closet instead of Penelope's proper carrier. The basket, as if she were a common house cat being taken to the veterinarian. Then had come the drive which Penelope had endured with the stoic grace expected of a Persian of her distinguished lineage, though she had made certain to emit one perfectly calibrated yowl when the car hit a pothole just to communicate her feelings on the matter. Now, as the automatic doors of the pet hotel whooshed open, Penelope caught her first whiff of the place. It's clean, she had to admit, not unpleasantly so. The scent was neutral, with undertones of lavender and something citrus. Through the mesh of her basket, she could see cream-colored walls, potted plants in corners, and lighting that was mercifully soft rather than the harsh fluorescent she'd feared. A young woman in a neat blue vest greeted her human with genuine warmth, and Penelope noted, with a slight lowering of her guard, that the woman's hands were gentle as she helped transfer the basket to a wheeled cart. "She's beautiful," the woman said, peering through the mesh at Penelope. "What's her name?" "Penelope," her human replied, and Penelope heard the slight crack in her voice. "She's never been boarded before." "I'm so sorry, Penny. It's just for the holiday. You'll be so comfortable here, I promise." Penelope considered responding with an angry growl, but decided silence was more dignified. Let her human stew in guilt. It was no less than she deserved for abandoning Penelope to this place, however clean it might smell. The cart began to roll, and Penelope watched through the mesh as they moved down a hallway lined with enclosures. She caught glimpses of other animals. Gray tabby, curled in a plush bed, barely opened one eye as they passed. A golden retriever pressed against the glass of his space, tail wagging with such vigor that Penelope felt exhausted just watching. They passed two rabbits, sharing a large pen, and a rather distinguished-looking Russian blue, who met Penelope's gaze with what seemed like sympathetic understanding. Finally, the cart stopped. The attendant opened the basket's mesh door and made soft, coaxing sounds. Penelope stayed exactly where she was, forcing the woman to reach in and gently lift her out. The moment of being held passed quickly. The woman was practiced, her touch respectful, and then Penelope was being lowered into her assigned space. She had to admit, grudgingly, that they had done their best. The enclosure was spacious, with multiple levels connected by carpeted ramps. In one corner sat a litter box that appeared to be pristine, filled with the premium clay litter that Penelope preferred. The opposite corner featured a cushioned bed that looked genuinely comfortable, positioned near a window that offered a view of bare tree branches and gray sky. There were 2 bowls for food and water, both clean and placed on a mat. A scratching post stood near the center, and several soft toys were scattered about, though Penelope had no intention of acknowledging their existence. "There you go, sweetheart," the attendant said, closing the enclosure door with a gentle click. "I'll be back with your dinner in a few hours. The lights will dim at 8 o'clock, so you can get good rest. If you need anything, there's always someone here." Penelope watched her human say goodbye through the glass. The woman pressed her fingertips against it, and Penelope stared at her with what she hoped was withering reproach. Her human's eyes were damp. Good. Suffer. Eventually, mercifully, they left, and Penelope was alone, or so she thought. From the enclosure, directly adjacent to Penelope's, a sound emerged. A sound that Penelope's experienced ears immediately identified as belonging to a dog. Not just any dog, a young dog, An enthusiastic dog. It's the kind of dog that had never met a situation it didn't want to befriend. Hello? The voice was muffled by the glass barrier between them, but its exuberance was unmistakable. Hello? Oh, hi. You're new. I'm Pip. Who are you? Are we going to be friends? I think we're going to be friends. Penelope turned her head slowly, the way one might turn to observe an unpleasant mess that needed to be reported to housekeeping. Through the transparent barrier, she beheld the source of this assault on her peace. He was small, at least that was something. A Corgi, by the looks of him, possibly young, with enormous ears that stood upright on his head and a face split by the widest, most genuine grin Penelope had ever seen on any creature. His coat was a warm reddish brown and cream, and his stubby legs seemed barely able to contain the amount of enthusiasm packed into his compact body. His tail, or rather the stub where his tail should have been, was wiggling so fast it appeared to be vibrating. Hi, Pip said again, pressing his entire face against the glass that separated their enclosures. His breath made little fog patches on the transparent surface. I'm Pip. I've been here 3 whole days. It's really nice. The people are so nice. Are you nice? You look nice. Your fur is so fluffy. Is IT soft? I bet IT soft. Penelope regarded him for one long, measured moment. Then, with the dignity of a dowager queen dismissing a two-week courtier, she turned her back on him completely. She walked with deliberate slowness to the cushioned bed, arranged herself in a perfect loaf position with her paws tucked beneath her chest, and closed her eyes. Oh, Pip's voice hadn't diminished in volume at all. Are you tired? Are you going to sleep? That's okay. I'll wait. I'm very good at waiting, okay? I'm learning to be good at waiting. My person says I'm getting better. I'll be right here when you wake up. We're neighbors. Isn't that great? The silence that followed lasted approximately 15 seconds before Pip apparently spotted something interesting near his food bowl and became completely absorbed in investigating it, complete with enthusiastic snuffling sounds. Penelope cracked one eye open, just enough to confirm that yes, this was real. This was actually happening, okay? And then closed it again with a sigh so deep it seemed to originate from her very soul. This was going to be a long holiday. The first full day of Penelope's incarceration began far too early. She had spent the night curled in her bed, occasionally waking to the soft sounds of the pet hotel at rest. Footsteps in the hallway, the distant sound of a dog having pleasant dreams, the hum of heating vents keeping the temperature comfortable. It wasn't terrible, she had to admit, but it also wasn't her home, her window seat, her human's lap. Dawn came slowly through the window, painting the bare branches outside in shades of pink and gold. Penelope had always enjoyed sunrise. It was a civilized hour when the world was quiet and one could think. She stretched, extending each leg in turn, arching her back, opening her mouth in a silent yawn that showed all her teeth. Good morning, Penelope jumped, her fur puffing out instantly. She whirled to find Pip pressed against the glass barrier once again, his entire rear end wiggling with the force of his joy. You're awake? I've been awake for ages. Well, maybe not ages. Maybe just a little while. I watched the sun come up. Did you watch the sun come up? It was so pretty. Everything here is so pretty. You're pretty. Are we going to have breakfast soon? I love breakfast. Penelope fixed him with a stare that had, in the past, caused entire rooms of humans to fall silent in respect. Pip's tail continued wagging. The stare had no effect whatsoever. Throughout that first morning, Pip maintained a running commentary on everything he observed. When the attendants came with breakfast, Pip could barely contain himself. Food? It's food time. I love food time. What are you having? I'm having kibble. It's really good kibble. Do you like your food? I bet you like your food. Penelope ate her meal with exaggerated slowness, taking small, dainty bites, chewing thoughtfully. She could feel Pip watching her with fascination as she paused to groom her whiskers. He gasped as if witnessing a magic trick. Around mid-morning, An attendant came to take Pip out for playtime in one of the larger exercise areas. This, Penelope thought with relief, would give her some peace. But as Pip was being led away on his leash, he looked back at her through the glass and called out, "I'll be back soon. Don't miss me too much." The enclosure was blissfully quiet in his absence. Penelope settled herself on the highest perch in her space and allowed herself to relax. The winter sunlight, filtered through clouds, felt warm on her silver fur. She dozed when Pip returned, slightly damp from having discovered a water bowl in the play area. He greeted her as if they'd been separated for years. "You're still here. Of course, you're still here. Where would you go? I'm so glad you're still here." "I saw the most amazing ball. It was red. I pounced so high. The afternoon brought Pip's greatest performance yet." He had been given several toys that morning, including a small rubber ball and a rope toy, but his favorite, by far, was a plush duck. When squeezed, it produced a sound somewhere between a squeak and a honk that made Penelope's ears flatten involuntarily. Pip spent at least 20 minutes squeaking this toy at various volumes and frequencies, apparently conducting some sort of scientific experiment on the range of noises it could produce. Then, suddenly, he seemed to have an idea. His eyes widened. He picked up the duck, trotted over to the glass barrier, and, with great ceremony, pressed it against the transparent surface right at Penelope's eye level. "Squeak, I'm sharing," Pip announced, his voice muffled since his mouth was full of duck. "This is my favorite toy, and I'm sharing it with you. You can't hold IT because of the glass, but you can see IT. Isn't IT great?" Penelope, who had been in the middle of grooming her front paw, froze. Slowly, with the precision of someone defusing a bomb, she lowered her paw. She turned her head to look at Pip, at the duck pressed hopefully against the glass, at the pure, unfiltered joy radiating from every inch of the young dog. Then, with extraordinary deliberateness, she turned her entire body around, presenting Pip with a view of her magnificent plumed tail, and began grooming her other paw. "Okay," Pip said cheerfully, apparently unbothered. "Maybe later. I'll keep it right here in case you change your mind." And he did. For the rest of the afternoon, that duck sat pressed against the glass, a fuzzy yellow ambassador of goodwill that Penelope refused to acknowledge. Though, it must be said, she was always careful to position herself where she could see it in her peripheral vision, just to make sure it wasn't moving, of course, not for any other reason. By the second day, the staff had certainly noticed the dynamic developing between the grumpy Persian and the enthusiastic Corgi. During their morning rounds, the attendants would pause by the adjoining enclosures, smiling at the scene. "He's still trying," one of them murmured, watching as Pip pressed his face against the glass, talking animatedly about a bird he'd seen outside. "And she's still pretending she can't hear him," her colleague replied with a soft laugh. "But look, she's moved her bed closer to the glass." This was true, though Penelope would have argued vehemently that the move had nothing to do with Pip, and everything to do with the afternoon sun angle being slightly better in that position. The fact that it also happened to give her a clearer view of her neighbor was purely coincidental. Feeding time had become a routine that Pip anticipated with almost religious fervor. The moment he heard the squeak of the cartwheels in the hallway, he would leap to his feet and press himself against the glass. "Food, it's coming. Do you hear it?" "I hear it. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy." Penelope had learned to time her own reaction perfectly. She would remain in whatever position she'd adopted, perhaps on her perch or in her bed, and only when the attendant was actually opening her enclosure door would she deign to rise and walk with the utmost grace toward her bowls, never hurrying, never showing eagerness, simply acknowledging that sustenance had arrived at an acceptable hour. "You eat so fancy," Pip observed one evening, watching as Penelope took a single kibble in her mouth, tilted her head back slightly to swallow, then paused to lick her chops before taking another. "My person says I eat like I think someone's going to steal it, but nobody steals food here. Everyone is so nice." "Why do you eat so slow?" Penelope, naturally, did not answer. But she did flick one ear in his direction, which was more acknowledgement than she'd offered in days. The nights were the quietest times. The main lights would dim at 8 o'clock, leaving only soft night lights that cast a gentle glow through the facility. Most of the animals would settle down to sleep, though some nights a dog would have a dream that involved barking, or one of the cats would decide that 3 o'clock in the morning was the perfect time for extensive grooming. Pip, Penelope discovered, talked in his sleep. Little muffled yips and yaps, his paws twitching as he chased dream rabbits or dream balls or whatever it was that puppies dreamed of. The first night this happened, Penelope had opened one eye to observe him through the glass, curled in his own bed, his ears flopping as his dream self ran and played. Something in her chest had tightened, just slightly, just enough to be uncomfortable. She had pushed the feeling away immediately and gone back to sleep. Days turned into nearly a week, and patterns emerged as solid as the winter frost on the windows. Pip would wake each morning with the same explosive enthusiasm, as if each dawn was the first he'd ever seen. He would greet Penelope with the same booming good morning that made her fur stand on end, despite her being completely prepared for it now. He would eat his breakfast with the same joy, play with the same dedication, and press his squeaky tuck against the glass with the same hopeful generosity. And Penelope would respond with the same studied indifference, the same deliberate turning away, the same exaggerated sighs, the same refusal to acknowledge that there was anything remotely interesting happening in the enclosure next to hers. Except, that when Pip was taken out for his morning playtime, Penelope found herself watching the door until he returned. She told herself this was because the silence made her uneasy, not because she was concerned about where he'd gone. Except that when Pip shared his toy through the glass, Penelope no longer turned her back completely. She might look away, yes, but at an angle that still kept the duck in her peripheral vision. Except that at night, when Pip's sleep-talking began, Penelope would open her eyes and watch him for a moment before allowing herself to drift off. Outside, the weather had turned colder. Snow began to fall one afternoon, fat flakes that drifted past the window and collected on the bare branches. Pip was beside himself with excitement. Snow. It's snowing. Look at the snow. It's so white and fluffy, kind of like you, but more white. You're more gray. It's pretty gray. Have you seen snow before? I have seen snow. I love snow. Penelope watched the snow fall with the dignified appreciation of someone who had seen many winters. She did not bound around her enclosure. She did not press her nose against the glass. She simply observed, as a cat of her stature should. But she did notice, in a moment of weakness, she immediately regretted that the snow was indeed rather beautiful. The way it softened everything, made the world look clean and new and quiet. Isn't it pretty? Pip asked, his voice dropping to something almost resembling an indoor volume for the first time since Penelope had met him. My Persian and I used to sit by the window and watch snowfall. She'd have hot chocolate and I'd have a special treat, and we'd just ... watch. The wistfulness in his voice was unmistakable. Penelope's ears swiveled toward him of their own accord. This was the first time Pip had mentioned missing his home, his person, the first crack in the endless enthusiasm. I miss her, Pip said quietly. Do you miss your person? Penelope did not answer, could not answer, even if she wanted to. But she did something she hadn't done since arriving at the pet hotel. She got up from her perch, walked to the glass barrier, and sat down directly across from where Pip was sitting, watching the snow. They sat like that, side by side but separated by glass, watching the winter come down from the sky in silent white pieces. Then, one morning, Penelope woke to find something had changed. The pet hotel was quieter. Several of the enclosures she could see from her perch were empty. To the window, she could see families arriving in the parking lot, bundled against the cold, coming to collect their pets for the holidays. Okay, people are going home, Pip announced. Though his enthusiasm was tempered with an emotion Penelope recognized. Uncertainty. That's good. I'm happy for them. A person is coming to get me the day after tomorrow. When does your person come? The day after tomorrow. Christmas Eve. Penelope's human was scheduled to return on Christmas Day. This information had been relayed to her in soothing tones by the staff, but the concept of time as humans measured it was somewhat abstract to Penelope. She knew her human would return. Eventually, that was all that mattered. But the day after tomorrow, it meant Pip would be gone for ... Penelope shut down that line of thinking immediately. What did it matter when Pip left? It would simply mean the return of proper peace and quiet. No more incessant cheerfulness. No more squeaky toys pressed against glass. No more running commentary on every single thing that happened within Pip's field of vision. This was good news. Excellent news. Except that afternoon, as Pip played with his rope toy, tossing it in the air and catching it with puppy-clumsy enthusiasm, Penelope realized she had been watching him, not pretending not to watch, actually watching, following the arc of the toy, anticipating his pounce, even feeling a small pulse of satisfaction when he caught it perfectly. "Did you see that?" Pip asked, spinning to face her. "I caught it. Getting so good at catching." Penelope looked away quickly, but not quite fast enough. Their eyes had met for a moment, and in that moment, Penelope saw that Pip knew she'd been watching, knew she'd been paying attention all along. His tail wiggled even faster. That evening, as the sun set early in the winter sky and the lights in the pet hotel dimmed to their nighttime setting, Penelope noticed that Pip was being quieter than usual. He'd eaten his dinner without comment, played with his toys in a subdued manner. When he settled into his bed, he didn't need chatter about his day, or make observations about the weather, or share plans for his dreams. He simply curled up, his nose tucked under his paw, and was still. Penelope watched him from her own bed, in the dim light, with his eyes closed and his breathing deep and even. Pip looked impossibly small, young, a child, really, just a puppy, separated from his person, trying his best to be brave and cheerful in a strange place, just like she was trying to be brave and dignified in a strange place. The thought arrived fully formed in Penelope's mind, and with it came an emotion she'd been holding at bay since arriving at the pet hotel. She missed her human. She missed her home. She was lonely, and so was Pip. Penelope closed her eyes, tucking her own nose under her paw, her silver fur catching the soft glow of the nightlights. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve. The day after, Pip would leave. Then, the day after that, her own human would arrive. 2 more days. She could maintain her dignity for 2 more days. Christmas Eve arrived with a hush that seemed to deepen as the day progressed. More enclosures emptied as families came to reunite with their pets. The staff moved through the facility with unhurried grace, taking extra time to speak gently to those animals who remained. In the break room, someone had brought cookies, and the scent of sugar and cinnamon drifted through the hallways. Pip was scheduled to be picked up that evening. His person had called to say she'd arrive right after dinner, around 7 o'clock. He'd been told this at breakfast time, and his reaction had been everything the staff expected. "Tonight, my person is coming tonight. Oh, I'm so excited. I can't wait to see her. She's the best. Wait until I tell her about everything. I have so much to tell her." Penelope had been eating her breakfast when this announcement came. She'd paused, just for a moment, before continuing to eat with the same deliberate slowness as always. Throughout the day, Pip's excitement built to fever pitch. He couldn't seem to sit still. Paced his enclosure, played with every toy, pressed his face against the door whenever he heard footsteps. And yet, several times, Penelope noticed him looking at her with an expression that seemed almost sad. "I'm going to miss this place," Pip said at one point. "Everyone here is so nice, and the food is good, and my bed is comfortable." He paused, then added more quietly, "And I'm going to miss you." Penelope, who had been grooming her face, froze. Her paw hung in the air for a moment, before she lowered it slowly. She looked at Pip through the glass. "I know you think I didn't notice," Pip continued, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "But you started listening. You started watching. I know you didn't mean to be my friend, but I think maybe you were, anyway. A little bit." Penelope wanted to turn away, wanted to dismiss this with her usual disdain, wanted to maintain the fiction that she hadn't cared at all. But it was Christmas Eve, and Pip was leaving. And something in Penelope's ancient, dignified heart cracked just slightly. She stood up, walked to the glass barrier, and pressed one white paw against it, right where Pip could see. Pip's eyes widened, then his whole face lit up with a joy so pure it hurt to witness. He pressed his own paw against the glass on his side, matching hers. For a long moment, they stayed like that, paw to paw with only glass between them. "I knew it," Pip whispered. "I knew you liked me." Penelope couldn't speak, but she didn't move away. Evening came. The main lights dimmed early at 6 o'clock instead of 8, and the staff lit battery-operated candles that they placed throughout the facility. Someone had turned on gentle music, old carols playing softly in the background. The effect was peaceful, almost magical. The pet hotel, usually bustling with activity, settled into a profound quiet. Pip's person arrived right on schedule. Penelope watched from her perch as the young woman hurried down the hallway, guided by a staff member. The moment Pip saw her, his joy was explosive. The attendant opened his enclosure, and Pip launched himself into his person's arms, wiggling and licking and making sounds of pure happiness that echoed through the facility. "Oh, buddy," the woman said, tears in her voice. "I missed you so much. Were you good? Did you make any friends?" Pip turned his head, still in his person's arms, and looked directly at Penelope. The woman followed his gaze. "Oh," she said softly. "That's a beautiful cat. Persian, right? Such gorgeous fur." Penelope sat very still on her perch, maintaining her dignified composure. She did not rush to the glass. She did not call out. She simply looked at Pip, held in the arms of the person he loved most in the world, being carried away toward home. "Goodbye," Pip's person said, speaking to Penelope as if she might understand. "Merry Christmas, pretty girl." And then they were gone. Footsteps fading, the front door opening and closing. The sound of a car starting in the parking lot. Silence. Penelope sat on her perch in the soft glow of the artificial candles. The carol playing in the background was one she recognized. Her human played it every December. Silent Night. It spoke of calmness, of brightness, of peace. She felt none of those things. The enclosure next to hers was empty. She could see into it clearly, all the way to the far wall. Pip's bed was there, still showing the impression where he'd slept. His toys were scattered across the floor. The duck, his favorite, sat near the glass barrier where he'd pressed it that final time, sharing it with her. Penelope got down from her perch. She walked to the glass that separated the two spaces. She sat down, very precisely, exactly where she'd sat when they'd watched the snow fall together. The pet hotel was profoundly quiet now. Most of the animals who remained were sleeping, settled in for the holy, still night. Through the window, Penelope could see the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. Christmas Eve, the longest night, or nearly so. She thought about Pip, his endless energy, his boundless enthusiasm, sincere, uncomplicated joy in simply existing. The way he'd tried every single day to be her friend. How he'd never stopped trying, even when she'd given him every reason to give up. And she thought about herself, how she'd resisted, how she'd turned away, how she'd protected her dignity at all costs, maintaining the walls around her heart, because that was what she'd always done, because that was safe, because that was easier than admitting that perhaps, she'd been lonely. Penelope closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her eyelids, she could almost see Pip, his face pressed against the glass, his eyes bright with hope. I was your friend, she whispered into the empty space. Her voice was barely audible, the first sound she'd made since arriving at the pet hotel. It came out as a soft, creaky meow that held more emotion than she'd intended to reveal, but there was no one to hear it. Or so she thought. Hours passed. The staff made their final rounds, checking water bowls, ensuring everyone was comfortable, adjusting blankets. The carols continued to play softly, an endless loop of peace and hope and goodwill. Outside, it began to snow again, the flakes catching the light from the windows and glittering as they fell. Penelope had retreated to her bed, but found she couldn't sleep. She kept looking at the empty enclosure next door, expecting to see Pip there, asleep and dreaming. But there was only emptiness. Around midnight, she heard something, a sound so soft she almost missed it, the quiet squeak of wheels. Footsteps padding softly down the hallway. Penelope opened her eyes. Through the dim light, she saw an attendant pushing a cart, moving with careful quietness so as not to disturb the sleeping animals. The cart stopped at Pip's empty enclosure. The attendant opened the door and went inside, beginning to gather the toys and clean the space for the next occupant. Penelope watched as the woman picked up the duck. She looked at it for a moment, then turned and looked directly at Penelope. Their eyes met. The attendant smiled. Okay. She walked to the glass barrier between the two spaces and crouched down, holding the duck where Penelope could see it. He really liked you, she said softly. I could tell you wanted so badly to be your friend. She paused, considering the toy in her hands. You know what? Think you wanted to be his friend too. But sometimes it's hard to let people in, isn't it? Penelope stared at the woman, at the duck. At this unexpected moment of understanding at midnight on Christmas Eve, the attendant stood up. Merry Christmas, Penelope, she said. Then she left, taking the cart with her, leaving Pip's enclosure empty and clean. Penelope remained in her bed, looking at the space where her neighbor had been. Silent night. Holy night. All is calm. Outside, the snow continued to fall, the world holding its breath in the space between darkness and the return of light. And Penelope, dignified, elderly Penelope, who had never needed anyone, who had maintained her standards and her pride through everything, did something extraordinary. She began to purr. It started small, barely a vibration in her chest, but it grew, a deep rumbling sound that filled her small space, the sound of contentment and sadness and gratitude all mixed together. It was not a loud purr, but it was genuine, the kind of purr that cats only offer when they're being completely honest with themselves. It's the kind that acknowledges truth, even when that truth is uncomfortable. She had cared about Pip, despite everything, despite her determination not to, despite all her dramatic sighs and studied indifference. That ridiculous, enthusiastic puppy had somehow found his way past her defenses. And now that he was gone, she felt his absence like a physical thing. The purr continued, rising and falling like a tide, as Penelope curled herself tighter in her bed. Through the window, she could see the snow falling steadily now, blanketing the world in white silence. Christmas morning was only hours away. Her human would arrive tomorrow, and she would go home to her familiar window seat and her favorite cushion, and everything would return to normal. But normal, she realized with a start, would now include the memory of a small Corgi who had tried every single day to share his joy with a grumpy old cat who pretended not to notice. Penelope's purr caught for a moment, almost like a hiccup, and if cats could cry, she might have. Instead, she pressed her face into her paws and let the purr resume, a lullaby she was singing to herself in the deep silence of Christmas Eve. She must have dozed, because the next thing Penelope knew, there was light filtering through the window. Not the artificial glow of the facility's nightlights, but genuine dawn light. Pale and soft, the kind of light that only comes on Christmas morning. Penelope lifted her head, blinking. The carols were still playing, though someone had changed to different songs. Come, all the faithful. Her human had always liked that one. She stretched, feeling the stiffness in her joints that came with age and sleeping in an unfamiliar place, even one as comfortable as this bed had been. And then she heard it. "Hello." Penelope's head whipped around so fast she nearly gave herself whiplash. She stared at the glass barrier. There, pressed against it with his nose, making little fog patches on the surface, was Pip. "Merry Christmas," he shouted, his entire rear end wiggling with the force of his joy. "I came back." "Well, I didn't come back. I never left." Surprise. Penelope felt as if her brain had stopped working. She stared at him, unable to process what she was seeing. Pip was supposed to be gone. Pip was supposed to be home with his person. Pip was supposed to be a memory that she would carry with quiet regret for the rest of her dignified life. "I know," Pip said, apparently reading confusion on her face. "You thought I left. Everyone thought I left. But then my person and I were getting in the car and she had an idea. Such a good idea. The best idea." An attendant appeared, the same woman who had spoken to Penelope the night before. She was smiling as she leaned against the wall near Pip's enclosure. "I take it she's awake?" she asked Pip, though of course she could see Penelope sitting bolt upright in her bed, staring with wide eyes. "She's awake. Isn't this amazing? My person came to get me, but then she saw you and she asked about you, and the staff told her you were going home tomorrow, and she had this idea." Pip's mom asked if she could board him one more night. The attendant explained, her voice soft with amusement. "She said she noticed how much he kept looking at you when she was getting him, and when we mentioned you'd be here alone on Christmas, she thought maybe, ... Double quotes. The woman shrugged. "Maybe you two could spend the holiday together. C went home last night, spent Christmas Eve with her family, and she'll be back this afternoon to get him for real." Penelope continued to stare. Made no sense. Humans didn't do things like that. They did underlay reunions with their beloved pets, just so a grumpy old cat would unspend Christmas alone. "My person is the best person," Pip announced proudly. She said, "Everyone deserves a friend on Christmas, even grumpy cats who pretend they don't want friends, but really do." The attendant laughed softly. "I'll leave you two to your Christmas morning. Breakfast will be here in about an hour. There might be some special holiday treats involved." She left, and Penelope and Pip were alone again, or rather, together again. Separated by glass, but somehow more connected than Penelope had felt to anyone in a very long time. "So," Pip said, settling himself into a sitting position that mirrored Penelope's. "Merry Christmas. Got you a present." He turned and trotted away from the glass, returning a moment later with his duck. With great ceremony, he pressed it against the barrier, right at Penelope's eye level. "Squeak. I'm still sharing," he explained unnecessarily, "because that's what friends do. And we are friends now, right? I mean, I saw you put your paw on the glass yesterday. That was basically you saying we're friends. You can't take it back now." Penelope looked at the duck. She looked at Pip's hopeful face. She thought about her human who would arrive tomorrow and take her home. She thought about Pip's person who had given up Christmas Eve with her puppy so that an old cat wouldn't be alone. She thought about all the walls she'd built around her heart, and how this ridiculous dog had somehow found a way through them simply by refusing to believe they existed. And then Penelope did something she had never done in her entire life. She got up from her bed, walked to the glass barrier, and very deliberately, very obviously, she touched her nose to the glass, right where the duck was pressed against it on the other side. Pip's eyes went wide. "You touched the duck. You touched it. Well, you touched the glass where the duck was, but that counts. That totally counts. We're officially friends now. This is the best Christmas ever." Hey, perhaps it was the soft light of Christmas morning, or perhaps it was the carols still playing in the background, or perhaps it was simply that she was tired of fighting against something that had already won. But Penelope felt something in her chest loosen, felt the last of her resistance fall away. She couldn't speak to him, not in words he would understand. But she could do something else. Maintaining eye contact with Pip, she began to purr, loudly. So loudly that even through the glass, she was certain he could hear it. "You're purring?" Pip gasped. "I can hear you purring. Oh, this is ... double quotes. He seemed overwhelmed, his tail wiggling so hard, his whole body shook. "This is the best sound I've ever heard. Well, second best. My person's voice is the best, but this is second best. Can you teach me how to purr?" "I don't think I can purr. Dogs don't purr. But maybe I can learn." Penelope's purr deepened, becoming almost a laugh. The absurdity of trying to teach a dog to purr. The impossibility of this entire situation. The unlikeliness of any of it. But here they were. A grumpy old Persian cat and an enthusiastic young Corgi puppy, separated by glass, but connected by something that had formed slowly, stubbornly, against all odds. Friendship that neither of them had been looking for, but both of them, it turned out, had needed. Christmas Day at the pet hotel was unlike any other day. The staff, working a skeleton crew for the holiday, were relaxed and cheerful. They wore Santa hats and played carols and gave every animal in their care extra attention and treats. The few pets who remained seemed to absorb the peaceful joy of the day, settling into contented naps or gentle play. For Penelope and Pip, it was a day of discovery, because now that Penelope had finally officially acknowledged their friendship, she found she didn't quite know what to do with it. She had spent so long being solitary, so committed to her dignity and independence, that the concept of having a friend was almost foreign. But Pip, bless him, made it easy. "You don't have to do anything special," he explained when Penelope seemed uncertain about what was expected of her. "Being friends just means we like each other, and we hang out, and we share things, okay? Like I share my duck with you, and you share your ... Cam, you're looking at me. You share your looking with me." It was such a Pip way of explaining things that Penelope felt her whiskers twitch in what might have been amusement. They spent the morning simply being in each other's presence. Pip played with his toys, narrating his adventures. "This ball is actually a dragon's egg, and I have to protect it from the evil floor, because the floor wants to steal it. But I'm too fast." He pounced on the ball, sending it rolling across his enclosure. Penelope watched from her perch, her tail curled around her paws. When Pip looked at her for approval, she blinked slowly, the cat equivalent of a smile. His entire face lit up. "You're watching. You're really watching. This is amazing. Okay, now watch this. ... Lunch arrived with promised special treats. Pip received a festive bone-shaped cookie that smelled of peanut butter and pumpkin. Penelope was given a small portion of delicate white fish, flaked and arranged beautifully in her bowl. They ate their holiday meals while sneaking glances at each other through the glass. And when Pip announced that his cookie was the most delicious thing he'd ever eaten, Penelope had to admit that her fish was exceptional. In the afternoon, it snowed again. They sat together, as they had before, watching the flakes drift past the window. But this time, Penelope didn't sit in silence. She allowed herself a small, contented purr, and Pip's tail did its happy wiggle wag in response. "Snow on Christmas is special," Pip said quietly. "My person told me that. Cam," she said, "it makes everything look clean and new, like the whole world gets a fresh start." A fresh start. Penelope considered this as she watched the snowfall. Perhaps that was what this was. It's a chance to let go of old patterns that no longer served her. It's a chance to admit that being alone and being independent were not the same thing. That she could be dignified and still have connections. That walls built to protect yourself could also keep out joy. "Thank you," she tried to say, but of course, it came out as a soft meow. But Pip seemed to understand anyway. "You're welcome," he replied cheerfully. For what? For trying, Penelope thought. For not giving up. For being so relentlessly genuinely yourself that I had no choice but to eventually respond to it. For being my friend when I didn't know I needed one. Pip's person arrived at 3 o'clock, right on schedule. Penelope had known this moment was coming, had been bracing herself for it since breakfast. But still, when she heard the familiar voice in the hallway, saw the attendant bringing the woman to Pip's enclosure, her heart clenched. This time, it was different though, because this time, Penelope wasn't watching from a distance, pretending not to care. She was pressed against the glass barrier, as close as she could get to Pip, sharing these last moments with him. When the enclosure door opened and Pip bounded to his person, the reunion was just as joyful as it had been the night before. But this time, once the initial excitement had settled, Pip led his person over to the glass. "This is Penelope," he told her, as if introducing the most important individual in the world. "She's my friend. She's going home tomorrow. I hope her person knows how lucky they are." The woman crouched down, looking at Penelope with warm eyes. "Hello again, Penelope," she said softly. "Thank you for keeping Pip company. I know he can be a lot, but he's got a good heart." Penelope met the woman's gaze steadily. She wanted this human to understand something important, wanted her to know that her sacrifice, her decision to give up one night with her beloved pet so that a lonely cat would unspend Christmas alone, had mattered. So, Penelope did something she rarely did with strangers. She pressed her paw against the glass, the same gesture she used with Pip, a gesture of connection, of gratitude. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh, you sweet girl." Pip pressed his paw against the glass on his side, matching Penelope's. For a moment, it was as if there was no barrier at all, just two friends saying goodbye. "I won't forget you," Pip promised. "Even when I'm home and playing with my toys and sleeping in my own bed, I'm going to remember you, my first friend at the pet hotel, my Christmas friend." Penelope wanted to tell him she wouldn't forget him either, okay? That she would carry him with her. This lesson in openness and joy and the courage to try even when you might fail. But all she could do was purr, loud and long and genuine. "She's purring," Pip told his person excitedly. "It's Fessamai, she likes us. Cats only purr when they like things." "I hear her," the woman said gently. "That's a very happy purr." They gathered Pip's things, his toys, his blanket, his leash, and then, with one final wiggle and a shouted by Penelope, "Merry Christmas. Be good. Be happy. I'll miss you." Pip was gone, really gone this time. The enclosure next door was empty once more. But this time, Penelope didn't feel the same hollow loneliness, because this time was different. This time, she had let herself care. She had let herself be a friend. And even though Pip was gone, even though they would probably never see each other again, she had been changed by knowing him. She returned to her bed, curling up in a patch of late afternoon sun. Outside, the winter day was beginning to fade toward evening. Tomorrow, her human would come. Tomorrow, she would go home. Go. But tonight, she was content. Penelope's human arrived early on the day after Christmas, bursting through the door of the pet hotel with tears already streaming down her face. The moment the attendant opened Penelope's enclosure, the woman scooped her up, burying her face in Penelope's silver fur. "I missed you so much," she murmured. So much. "I'm sorry I had to leave you here, Penny. I'm so sorry." Penelope allowed herself to be held, to be kissed on the head, to be told how beautiful and precious and perfect she was, and she purred. Not because she was expected to, but because she genuinely was happy to be reunited with her human. As they were preparing to leave, as her human was signing papers and thanking the staff, one of the attendants smiled at them. "She made a friend while she was here," the woman said. "A young Corgi puppy. They were adorable together." "Really?" Penelope's human looked down at her in surprise. "Penny made a friend." "My Penny? It's the one who hisses at the neighbor's dog." "She did," the attendant confirmed. Took her a while to admit it. "But yes, They were very sweet together. The puppy's owner even delayed picking him up so they could spend Christmas together. Penelope's human's eyes filled with fresh tears. That's so kind. I can't believe Penny, actually. She's usually so, ... double quotes, grumpy. The attendant supplied with a kind smile. I think sometimes we all need someone who sees past the grumpy to the goodness underneath. As they left the pet hotel, Penelope took one last look at the enclosure that had been hers for nearly a week, and at the enclosure next door, where a small puppy had taught an old cat that it was never too late to let someone in. The car ride home was familiar and comforting. Her human talked the entire time, telling Penelope about the holiday, about the family she'd visited, about how every single day she'd thought about her and missed her and could not wait to get home. When they finally arrived at their house, when Penelope was released from her carrier and allowed to walk through rooms that smelled like home, she felt a deep satisfaction settle into her bones. This was where she belonged. This was her domain. She went immediately to her favorite window seat, the one that overlooked the front yard and caught the best sun. She arranged herself in it, tucking her paws beneath her chest, and looked out at the world. The neighbor's dog was in their yard, a large golden retriever who had never been anything but friendly in all the years they'd been neighbors. Usually, when he saw Penelope in the window, she would fix him with a cold stare until he looked away. It was tradition. It was the natural order of things. But today, when the golden retriever spotted her and his tail began to wag, Penelope did something different. She blinked at him, slowly, the way she'd learned to do with Pip, a gesture of acknowledgement, if not quite friendship. The golden retriever's tail wagged harder. Penelope's human, who was watching from the kitchen, nearly dropped her coffee mug. "Penny," she said in disbelief. Did you just be nice to Roger?" Penelope didn't respond, just settled more deeply into her window seat, allowing herself a small, private purr, because she had learned something during her time at the pet hotel. Something that a relentlessly cheerful Corgi puppy had taught her through sheer determination and goodness of heart. Connection didn't make you weak. Opening yourself up to friendship didn't diminish your dignity. And being loved didn't mean losing yourself. It meant finding parts of yourself you didn't know existed. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and gentle, blanketing the world in quiet white. Penelope watched it drift down, thinking about a small puppy who had never stopped trying, who had shared his favorite toy through glass, who had shown her what it meant to approach life with joy and openness and hope. She would probably never see Pip again. Their lives had intersected for one brief, unlikely moment, and then diverged once more. But that moment had been enough to remind her that life was richer when you let others in, that the walls we build to protect ourselves can also become prisons, that it's never, ever too late to open your heart, even just a little. Even when you're a grumpy, elderly Persian cat who has spent 12 years perfecting the art of dignified solitude. Even then, especially then, Penelope closed her eyes, her purr deepening, the sound of contentment and peace and gratitude mixing together. Tomorrow would bring its own small adventures. The mail carrier to watch, the birds at the feeder, the afternoon sun moving across her window seat, the evening cuddles with her human. But tonight, she would rest, and she would remember. She would carry with her the gift that an unlikely friendship had given her, the knowledge that the heart has infinite capacity for connection, if only we're brave enough to try. The snow continued to fall outside, each flake unique and beautiful and temporary, just like the moments that make up a life, just like the brief, shining friendship between a grumpy cat and a joyful puppy who refused to believe that glass could keep them apart. And somewhere across town, in a warm house with a crackling fireplace, a small Corgi puppy was telling his person all about his friend Penelope, the most beautiful, dignified, wonderful cat in the whole world, who had finally, on Christmas Day, touched her nose to his squeaky duck through the glass. Both of them, cat and dog, had been changed by knowing each other. Both of them would carry that week with them, a reminder that connection can find us in the most unexpected places. Both of them would sleep well that night, content in the knowledge that they had been seen, been known, been valued by another soul. And that, really, is all any of us want. To be witnessed, to be appreciated, to have someone try, really try, to reach us, even when we make it difficult. To be someone's friend, even if only for a little while, especially if only for a little while. Because sometimes the briefest connections leave the deepest marks. If this story resonated with you, if it brought a smile to your face or a warmth to your heart as you drifted towards sleep, please consider showing your support with a like and subscribe to Deep Sleep Stories Hub for more quiet nights and restful journeys, for more tales of connection and growth in the small, beautiful moments that make up a life. May your dreams be peaceful, and may you wake knowing that it's never too late to open your heart to unexpected friendship. Sleep well.